Hello, I hope you're well today. Lots of people, when they think about stopping drinking and getting sober, think about it in terms of that they're giving something up. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about the importance of thinking about it as if you're gaining something in your life. When you think about stopping drinking and living life sober, if you think about it in terms of it's adding something to your life, you're gaining from it and all the benefits it's going to give you, all the value it's going to add to you, it's much, much easier to stay on track, to stay strong, to stay motivated and to stay committed. So having a positive mindset, having a positive approach where you're counting all of the benefits, the gains and the value being sober adds to your life is really, really important, and it really helps you along your way. And in today's video, I'm going to give you a really good example of this, of how stopping drinking and living my life sober has added so much value to my life that I couldn't have even anticipated when I was actually drinking, when I was thinking about stopping drinking. I didn't really know back then how much value being sober was going to add to my life. So yesterday, and this is one of the reasons that I'm recording this video in the car today, yesterday, I woke up in the morning to find that my boyfriend was really ill. It was the early hours of the morning and he'd woken up and he couldn't move his head. He was just pinned to the bed, and every time he tried to move his head from one side to the other, up or down, every time he moved his body, his head just kind of span. It was as if he was kind of suffering from really extreme vertigo, or the room was spinning, the bed was rocking, he felt nauseous, he felt sick. And he was terrified. He was absolutely terrified. And so I called the ambulance, and the ambulance guys arrived. They were brilliant. They were absolutely brilliant, and talked things through with them. They were there for a couple of hours. They did all sorts of checks. And although they're not allowed to diagnose anything, you have to see a doctor before you can get a diagnosis, they had a pretty good idea of what it was. And they said it was something called labyrinthitis, which I'd never ever heard of before. And it's to do with the ear. It's to do with some sort of nerve or something in the ear that I won't bore you with the science of it and the detail of it, but it's something to do with the nerve in the ear, and it affects your balance. And it affects the messages that are being sent to your brain, and they reckon this is what it was. So we're getting him sorted, and he's now absolutely fine. And the point I want to make is that yesterday was a day of trauma. It was a day of drama. It was a day of just lots of stuff going on, and lots of melodrama, lots of fear, lots of panic. So what I had to deal with yesterday was being woken up early in the morning. I had to deal with my boyfriend being in a really weird way. It was quite frightening, actually, the fact that he couldn't move his head and that everything was spinning. Neither of us knew what it was. We didn't know if it was something to do with his brain or a stroke or whatever. We didn't know what it was. So I was having to deal with that. I had to call the ambulance. I had to talk calmly and in control and in a helpful way to the ambulance guys when they turned up. I had to sit and wait and chat to them. They were there for a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, because they had to wait on a GP, on a local doctor, to get back to them before they could leave us and they kind of have to tick it off. I didn't know any of this before because I've never had anything to do with an ambulance before, but they have to tick off the case once they've arrived. They've got to kind of see it through to its end, and there's got to be some kind of action at the end of it before they can tick it off and move on to their next visit. So they didn't want to do that until they'd actually had a call back from our local doctor. So we had to sit waiting for a couple of hours with these guys. I had to chat to them, had to keep the conversation going. And one of them was extremely chatty, very good at what he did, very good and really helpful, and explained loads of stuff, but he really did like to talk. So on top of everything else, I had to keep him entertained and keep chatting to him and keep pretending to be interested when I really wasn't. and all of that stuff. Once they'd left, I had to go to the doctors. I had to register my boyfriend at the doctors because he wasn't registered. Naughty him. And I had to pick up some medication. I then had to go to the chemist and I had to pick up some painkillers and bits and bobs. I then had to come home. I then had to kind of nurse him the rest of the day. I had to make a note of the time he was taking his paracetamol, the time he was taking his ibuprofen, and I had to kind of stagger the taking of these painkillers so that he wasn't taking them too often within a 24-hour period. So I had to keep a careful track of everything. And of course, I had to also be there for my boyfriend. I had to give him hope. I had to give him reassurance. I had to give him comfort. And I just wanted to be there for him, to support him and help it be an easier experience for him. And that's the reason I'm in the car today, because he's ill in the house and I'm having to keep him really quiet and calm. And so I've come out into the car to record my video today. So the reason I'm sharing this with you as an example of how being sober has added massive value to my life is that everything I had to contend with yesterday, how I had to be yesterday, what I had to do yesterday, was all possible because I was sober. I was able to be relaxed. I was able to stay calm. I was able to stay in control. I was able to support my partner. I was able to deal with the ambulance men. I was able to deal with the running around from A to B. I was able to drive. I was able to do everything that was required of me to help my partner get through the day. And I was able to do all of that, firing on all cylinders and in healthy mind, spirit and body myself, because I was sober. If I'd have been drinking, or way back in my drinking days, it would have been a very different story. I might have had problems driving because I might have been over the limit. I certainly wouldn't have been able to manage all of the medication side of things, keeping a record of when he needed what medication at what time and how to stagger those and how to stay on top of the kind of sequential order of the medication that he was having yesterday. That would have been a real challenge for me if I was hungover or if I'd been drinking. I wouldn't have been firing on all cylinders. I wouldn't have been able to give him the same kind of loving care and support that I was able to yesterday. There's so many ways in which being sober has added value to my life, and in particular regarding yesterday, enabled me to cope with everything that was thrown at me in the most effective, the most productive way, and in a way that I was nice when I was doing it. I was actually pleasant while I was doing it. Nothing was stressful, nothing was difficult, nothing was too much for me. In my drinking days, it would have been a real struggle for me just to have got through one thing, let alone to get through 10 different things that were happening all at once. So what I've gained by being sober, if I'm just looking at that one day as an example, just looking at yesterday as an example, is I've gained the capacity, the energy and the brain power to be able to cope with trauma and drama when it's thrown at me. And I can do it in a way that I stay in control. And I didn't used to have that in my drinking days. Sure, I would have got through things. Sure, I would have got through it. But rather than managing it and being on top of it and being at the top of my game during it, I would have been struggling to just see my way through. And there are so many other ways that I've gained from being sober. There are too many to list, but literally things like waking up with a fresh head every day, being able to spend the first 10-20 minutes of my day planning how I'm going to organise my day, planning my priorities, being able to give 100% of myself to the people around me, to the relationships that are important to me. Oh gosh, there are so many things that happen on a day-to-day basis that it's almost impossible for me to think of them all right now. What I want you to take away from today's video is the importance on focusing on the gains. even if you haven't already started living your life sober, or even if you're kind of at that phase where you're dabbling with it, where you're taking a break from drinking and then you're going back to drinking again, or maybe you're even just thinking about stopping drinking and you haven't actually made that move yet. Or maybe if you've stopped drinking already, but you're in the early days of living your life sober. A really good tip is to approach getting sober by focusing on all of the benefits and gains and the value it's going to add to your life, instead of thinking about what you're giving up, what you're depriving yourself of, and what you're losing. Because at the end of the day, the stuff you're losing, the stuff you're depriving yourself of, what you're giving up is actually not doing you any good anyway. It's not bringing anything into your life. Your mind is kind of tricking you as to the value of what the drink is giving you, because that's its habit. That's the familiar habit it knows, and it doesn't really, your unconscious part of your mind doesn't really want to give that up because it doesn't know any different. So by focusing on all of the value that being sober is going to add to your life, what you do is you help the unconscious part of your mind to make that leap. You help yourself stay positive by focusing on all the gains and the benefits rather than on what you're losing. So if you're ever in a situation where you're thinking about, oh no, it's going to be awful on Friday night because I won't have my wine, or I won't have my beer, or I won't have my whiskey, or whatever it might be, and I won't be able to do this, I won't be able to do that, focusing on all the stuff you won't be able to do. Focus on the stuff you will. Focus on what it will give you to stay sober on the Friday night or the Saturday night or whatever it might be. Focus on how you're going to feel the next day that's going to be better. Focus on the benefits it's going to bring to you and your relationships, your work, your personal life. When you approach living your life sober by focusing on all of the value it's going to add to your life, all of the gains and benefits it's going to bring you, it's so much easier. It makes your life so much easier than thinking about what you're giving up and what you're losing. For a moment, think about the difference between saying, I'm giving up drinking, I'm giving up drinking, or I'm giving up alcohol. The difference between that and saying, I'm getting sober because it's going to be healthier for me. But just the two different ways of phrasing what it is you're going to be doing can make a massive difference to your motivation, to your strength, and to your commitment. By focusing on what you do want to have happen, you're actually giving yourself more strength. You're much more likely to succeed. So let me know, what are all the things, what are all the benefits that you're going to be gaining when you stop drinking and you're living your life sober? For more tips, inspiration and motivation to stop drinking and live your life happily and healthily sober, you can subscribe to my channel. I'll look forward to catching up with you very soon. But in the meantime, let's go get sober together.